All right, now we've just finished our 60-minute boil, and we're going to take our wort, which right now is very important that you keep the lid on and you keep it sanitized. And I'm putting it in an ice bath that I prepared. All right, and this ice bath is very important. I usually set the timer to about 15 to 18 minutes, and your ice bath will have to be constantly maintained over that time period. But that's about how long it'll take to get this wort down to about that mid to low 70s, or excuse me, mid to high 70s. But you will have to continually add ice and drain off some of the warmer water. Once again, this bucket comes in handy for transferring ice. Really, the easiest thing to do would be just to go to the store and buy a bag of ice, because you will go through all of it, cooling down. Now you're looking at a sanitized carboy. Once again, I filled this with about 5 gallons of water, and I put about a 1/4 cup of bleach in there. I let it soak for about 15 minutes. Then I rinsed it out, wished it around a few times, and then covered it with a sanitized piece of aluminum foil. Now what we're getting ready to do is to pour our cooled wort into our carboy. You want to make sure that you pay attention to the heat. If it's got to soak a little longer to cool down, you can stick your hand in the water and feel the side of the brew pot. You want to get it around 75 to 78 degrees. It's a lot more simpler than it sounds. But what you need to do prior to that, so you don't shock your carboy and crack it, is you want to add some water. In order to add water to your sanitized carboy, you're going to need your funnel. And I just put my strainer in there now, okay? Now it's been soaking in my Star San, and it's ready to go. So what I'll do is I will remove my sanitized piece of foil, put that there. I will also pull out another piece of sanitized foil and put that on top. This just ensures that none of the wild yeast that are flying around are going to get into your beer and contaminate it. I've also sanitized my 32-ounce graduated cylinder. And what I'm going to do now is I've got about 2 gallons of wort there, so I need to bring this up to about 3 gallons of water. What I generally typically do is I will pour in 4 of these for every gallon, and I will get about 2 gallons of water in there. Because what that allows you to do is, if you have to bring your wort down to that 78 degrees, 75 degrees, you can add very chilly water for your last gallon. So we've got our cool water, 2 gallons of cool water in our carboy. I've got my wort chilled down to what I believe is about 75, 78 degrees. And I've got everything sanitized. So now, this is where it helps to maybe have a friend or a spouse there to help you be that extra pair of hands, because this is where it's critical that you do not contaminate your wort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my cooled wort, remove the lid, and I'm pouring into the carboy. Now we've got our wort here, and I've noticed that I'm at about 72 degrees, which is great. There again, I've got about another gallon of water to add here, which I will. But for example's purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that this is already full. What you do is you take your sanitized piece of aluminum foil, remove your funnel, cover that baby back up, okay? Get your funnel over there, and you're going to want to rinse this stuff off quickly, because it's just so easy to rinse it now rather than waiting for it to dry. Now what you want to do is introduce oxygen into the wort prior to pitching your yeast. This is important because in the first stage of reproduction of the yeast life is, actually the first stage in the yeast life is reproduction. They need oxygen to do that. Once they've reproduced to fill this whole thing, then that's where you don't want to introduce any more oxygen. That's where carbon dioxide is your friend. So what you do is you put your hand over this and you just agitate the tar out of it. And you're not going to be able to agitate it any more than it needs to be. You're not going to hurt it. The more the better. See all the bubbles that are going in there? That's what you need to do. And just keep shaking your beer and shaking your beer and shaking your beer until you need a break. Now here's our White Labs yeast. that I showed in our ingredients segment. This is where it comes into play. You want to make sure it's at room temperature because yeast is kept chilled to keep it dormant until you need it. You want to pull it out 4 to 6 hours prior to use and let it acclimate to the surrounding environment. It will also settle out, so you want to shake it very good. This is where sanitation is key. Take your lid off. Do not touch this to any other surface. Once you've added your yeast, put it back in. And this is where you agitate your beer again. You just keep shaking it up until you see a bunch of bubbles, and you shake your beer until you can't shake it anymore. We've agitated our beer. We've got our yeast pitched. We are ready to put this baby away for about a week to 10 days and allow fermentation to happen. I use this to carry my carboy. You snap this guy on, slides around, very easy to use. Snap it on your carboy. You're going to want to take your blow-off hose with you and a bucket. You're going to take this to where you're going to let it sit for about a week to 10 days. You want it dark, and you don't want to disturb it. You don't want to shake it around. If the area is not completely dark, you can wrap it in a beach towel. That's very handy. One little trick that I do, because when you're done with your brewing process, you've got this gallon of Star Sands. In this case, it's 2 gallons because I had to do my big funnel. I use this Star Sands in my blow-off hose because it's already sanitized and nothing's going to live in there. Not necessary, but it's one more step in staying sanitary and clean. Alright, now we've brewed our beer. We've got what we call wort in our 6.5 gallon carboy. Everything is sterile, and that is the key to brewing, keeping everything sterile. You're either going to make good beer or great beer. The key to that is sterilization. So we've got our sterilized aluminum foil on our 6.5 gallon carboy full of wort. There again, we see that we have cooled our wort down to about 72 degrees, which is excellent for pitching our yeast. Once we pitch our yeast, and we use a Hefeweizen style ale yeast here, in this case, from White Labs. This costs about $7. You can get it at any brew store. Once we've pitched our yeast, we take our sanitized 1-inch blow-off hose and we stick that into the top of our carboy. You want to maintain integrity of an airtight seal. So I've placed it into a 1-gallon bucket, old-fashioned ice cream bucket. This works excellent. And within a few hours, you'll see activity in here from the yeast, and you will start to see even some of the krausen rising up through your hose. Alright, so that's how we prepare our primary fermenter for the next week of its life. Okay, now some suggestions for you. What I would do is I would do the steps that we just saw, where we take the sanitized 1-inch hose, blow-off hose, and into our old-fashioned ice cream bucket. I would do all this in the area that you plan on fermenting the beer. Now remember that this is an ale that we're doing here. Remember, an ale ferments best between about 65 and 75 degrees. Now, it's not rocket science, but when you start falling below there, you slow down the activity of the yeast. You actually slow down their metabolism. So it'll just take longer. So your optimum temperature is between 65 and 75 degrees. Usually through the fall and spring and summer months, this is ideal for your basement. The winter months, you want to just keep an eye on it and make sure that your basement doesn't get too cold. Well, folks, there it is. Cheers to you. Just remember, this is your brewer's Bible. You can't make bad beer. You can only make good beer and better beer. Have fun and happy home brewing.